So, Robin, how is it to be a living legend?
Well, I don't think of it like that. I'm just a sailor like everyone else. Every time you go to sea, you're the same. You're just as vulnerable as everyone else, so you're not any different.
But you are the first man who sailed alone around the world. Isn't that something special?
Well, it was at the time. It was the only thing I could see left to be done in sailing. Chichester had gone round with one stop. Therefore, the thing to do was to go round without stopping. Um, I didn't think I'd win it because I haven't a very fast boat. But I thought I'd probably get round because I got a very strong boat and I knew the boat and I was an experienced sailor. And so I thought, well, I'll go anyway and we'll see what happens. And of course, everyone else dropped out, so I eventually had to win.
What was the reason you did that? Was it adventure? Was it craziness? Was it nationalism?
No, it wasn't nationalism. That's a joke that's often told. It's not true. Um, it was much more to do with the fact, I think, that young, I can't speak for ladies, but for young men, there's always a desire for adventure. There's always a desire to go and do something different, something special. For me, inevitably, I've been at sea for 12 years. That was my life. For me, it was going to be to do with the sea. And having sailed back from India with Suhaili and got to know her well, I'd grown to like sailing very much. And I thought, here's something, maybe I can do that. And I knew the moment I said that, I've got to try, because if you don't try, you end up when you're 90 looking in the shaving mirror saying, I wish I'd done that. And that's a failure in life. That is a big failure. You can't say that. You've got to go and try it.
Now you're nearby 80. If you're looking back, was it the right decision to do it?
Oh, no question it was the right decision to do it. I enjoyed it. Yes, it's not always easy. It's sometimes frightening, inevitably, because the sea is a frightening place. But, the more experience you have, the less frightening it is. But even so, I look back on it now and say, well, I got that decision right.
What was the most difficult?
I think the most difficult bit, it's always making the decision. When you decide you're going to do something, then most of the problems disappear. Because while you're making your mind up, you're thinking of the problems. Once you said, I'm going to do it, those problems don't matter, because you're going to do it. Now you can focus on what matters, and that's a much more positive approach. But it's making that decision. Do I do this? Should I make a career break? Should I risk my life? All those things you have to think about. And then eventually you say, no, well, doesn't matter, I'm going to go. And then it's much easier.
So this is quite a philosophical way to look at it, but there has been practical difficulties, I guess.
Well, actually, I disagree. I don't think it's philosophical at all. It's totally practical, if you think about it. I mean, everyone knows, you want to make a career change, do something different with your life. It's a big decision to make. But once you've made that decision, then you can focus on it. And that's exactly what I did. I just became totally focused. Nothing's going to get in my way. I am going, and that is it. No one's going to stop me.
What did you feel when you left the harbor and you saw your daughter waving?
No, I didn't see my daughter waving. She wasn't there. Saw my mother when I left. I think one of the hardest things was looking at my mother's face. She was clearly worried. But, you just say, well, hey, I'm 29. I have to do the things I want to do. And any case, she loses one. She got 3 more sons, so she'll be all right.
Did she say that, or do you think that?
I said it as a joke.
On your way around the world, you encountered several severe problems. What was the most severe one?
Probably the most severe one would have been the leaking of the hull, but I fixed that near the equator. I dived and fixed the boat so she didn't leak so much. After that, it was when I got hit by a wave in a storm and his whole cabin moved. And after that, there was always water coming in the cabin. In fact, I thought I'd lose the cabin top. Now, an open boat is not the right thing to be in the Southern Ocean. So I bolted it back on. I spent 2 days with bolts that I had, just drilling and bolting, just to hold the cabin top on. And that was probably one of the worst things, apart from I got in a very bad storm halfway between Africa and Australia, and I hadn't learned how to control the boat in those very, very big waves, and she was being smashed. And I thought, ooh, she won't take much more. And then I tried putting out ropes at the back in a warp, and that was perfect. She just swung round, stern to the waves, and was comfortable. And after that, whenever I got in bad weather, I used to do that and go to bed. Nothing I can do till the wind eases. The boat's okay. Waves will come over the top, but she's safe, and I get some rest.
When you were down in the Southern Sea, you encountered very strong gales. Have you ever been scared to death there?
You know, there's no time to be scared to death. It's when you see a really big wave coming, and I'm talking about, say, 80 feet, and it's going from horizon to horizon. Now, the normal wave is like that, but it's when the sea wave and the swell wave combine, you get the very big wave. And if the top's curling and breaking, then it's dangerous. And I saw this very big one coming, and I was on deck, and I looked and saw it, and I thought, if I stay here, I'll be washed off. So I climbed the rigging, the mast, to get out of the way. And the wave came over the boat, and she disappeared. It just totally disappeared. There's just me and 2 masts, 1,500 miles in any direction. And of course she came up and then cleaned the mess. She got a lot of water inside her from that wave, so I had to bail her out.
What is going through your head in such a situation?
You don't really have time to panic. You're so busy dealing with the situation. It's afterwards you say, "Oh, that was close. But it's all right. We survived, so I won't worry about it." But really, at the time you see that wave coming, you're just saying to yourself, "Wow, I better get out of the way, fast." And you're being practical, you have to be.
You don't fear death in such a moment?
Well, I think if you... No, I didn't. I don't really think that way. It's not my normal way of thinking. It's not that I think I'm immortal, I don't think that, but I don't, you look at it, the risk coming, the threat coming, you say, well, I've got to deal with that. So you deal with it. If you start panicking and being frightened, you're not dealing with the problem, and you will kill yourself. You've got to be practical.
You had, how you call that, life vest with you, but you never took it on.
I don't think I had a life jacket on the boat, no. And I don't think I had a safety harness. We didn't have them in those days. I remember going out on the bowsprit once to sort out a sail, and I did tie myself on. And quite often I'd sit in the cockpit with a line round me, just in case. And it was necessary because sometimes a wave would hit the boat and you'd be driven forward. You'd smash up against the cabin, you'd just picked up and thrown. So it was a good thing to keep a line on you in case the wave came the wrong way and threw you over into the water. If you've got a line on, you can pull yourself back. So, I wasn't stupid about it. If I thought there was a risk, I put a line around myself. But normally when running around the boat, you're in a hurry to do something. It's probably, if you're in a rush, it's something I need to do fast, like a sail's flogging. If I don't deal with it, I'll lose that sail. I must deal with it. If you're going to stop to keep tying yourself on, the sail's ruined before you get there. You have to deal with it quickly, so you don't bother tying it, you run and deal with it. But you've got to remember, I know this boat well. I knew exactly where to put my hands to hold on to things. I'd sailed 18,000 miles before I set off on this voyage. This boat had been my home for a year and a half. I knew her very well.
Some people say sailing is boring. When you're out there, nothing happens anymore.
Well, those people have never been sailing, or they've no feeling for the sea, because the sea is always changing. You cannot be bored by looking at the sea. It's always changing. Every second it changes. And it's not just that, it's the life in the sea. You know, do I see these dolphins? Do I see the flying fish? What birds have I got? Are they seabirds or land birds? Land birds go home at night. That tells you where land is. So if you watch them towards dusk, you see land birds heading in a direction. You say, oh, there's land over there. But it depends how far out to sea they go. You've got the birds that stay at sea all their lives except when they breed, like albatross. They're always just flying around. They're beautiful to watch. You can just stand and watch them for hours, the way they glide along. It's just a beautiful sight. So if someone says they find it boring, well, I just turn around and say, you've got no imagination or you haven't done any real sailing.
What have you done when there was nothing to do with the boat underway?
Let me tell you something. There's always something to do with the boat. But when I lost the self-steering gear, so I had to steer or balance the boat, I'd be steering for 16 hours at a time. And I learned poetry. Because I realized when I get home I've got to get a job. And therefore I don't know if I'm going mad, but I need to do something to keep my mind active. So I took to sitting up there learning poetry. Don't ask me to repeat it now, I can't remember.
That's what I want you to do. Okay, could you repeat it, please?
Gray's elegy is quite long, so I won't even start. But at one stage I could recite it completely. And, you know, this was the thing you did. At other times I'd sit there. I spent 3 days designing the electrical circuits for a midget submarine. You know, because I've always loved what's underwater. And I thought, you know, when I get home, I'll make a small submarine. I spent 3 happy days in a totally different world designing this submarine. But I'm steering automatically. I'm watching the boat. I have to get up and do my navigation and all these other things. But then I'm back to it. Now, where did I get to? Ah, yes. Now that circuit, how am I going to work these dive planes? And for 3 days I was blissfully happy designing this submarine. I never built it, but I designed it.
Did you make plans out of it, or is it just in your mind?
It was just in my mind. It was, you know, to draw plans, I'd have to stop steering. And I can't do that. I've got to keep steering. You know, this is a race. I've got to keep pushing this boat. I didn't come here. You know, I thought I'll get round, but I knew off New Zealand I was leading, and I've too much to lose. I've got to keep pressing. I've got to keep pushing.
So it was a stress for you?
No stress. No, it's not stress. That's like getting into the boxing ring. There's no stress. You're thinking, what's this guy like? Is he quick? Has he got a better reach? Is he a fighter? Is he a scrapper? How am I going to box him? And you spend the first minute finding out how you're going to box him. That's not stress. That's curiosity.
Whom did you fight against? Against the sea, against yourself, or against Montessier?
Well, I was aware of Montessier. I knew he was behind me. I knew the gap between us was big enough for me to beat him, but I couldn't slow up. He was slowing down. He was very fast down the Atlantic, and then he slowed down a lot. And when I learned where he was, off New Zealand, they told me, I thought, I've got him if I can keep going. And in fact, he didn't know and I didn't know, but at Cape Horn I was 19 days in front of him. But neither of us knew that. Both of us found out later. We used to write letters to each other. I had great respect for Montessier.
Afterwards, when you were back, you wrote letters?
Oh, we wrote letters to each other. Yes, about once a year we'd write a letter to each other. I had great respect for him. Very good sailor. I liked him as a human. I liked his attitudes. Different to mine, but I could understand his attitudes. And I respected him for it.
Montessier, he sailed on. Did you ever think of sailing on as well?
I'm probably one of the few people who understood that. I could understand his thinking. Because as I got close to home, and all these boats with journalists are coming out, and they're all making demands and everything else, and I thought, no, don't like this. I've been very comfortable on my own for 10 months. I don't want this interference in my very stable life. And my stable life is as a creature of the sea now. So I do understand Montessier. I can understand why he decided he doesn't want to deal with that. But he made the decision much earlier than me. And by the time I was thinking about it, I was about 6 days from home, so I'm going home.
What does it feel like to be a creature of the sea?
Well, you don't think about it. You just become so accustomed to it. This is your life. This is what you do. I get up in the morning. I take an altitude of the sun. I calculate my longitude. At midday, I calculate my latitude. Maybe I'll get stars in the evening. We'll see what the weather's like. In the meantime, I've got to watch for repairs. I've got this to fix. I've got other things to do around the boat. There's always work to do on a boat. So, it's all proactive. You've got to do the work before something goes wrong. So you're constantly looking at your boat. You're checking everything's tight. Are the shackles tight? Is that not tight? Is everything all right up the mast? You're checking your boat the whole time. So you're always busy.
And didn't you feel lonely?
Well, a journalist said to me before I went, how are you going to deal with loneliness? And I said, I don't know. He said, well, have you been alone before? I said, no. He said, well, how do you know? I said, I don't. So if I'm back in 2 weeks, I'm not dealing with it. And I wasn't back in 2 weeks, so I dealt with it. And I didn't, I remember picking up dance music off Australia on a Saturday night and thinking, I should be there, chasing the girls, instead of which I'm out here on my own. And then I thought, and I wouldn't change with anyone. I've sailed halfway around the world on my own. Only 2 other people have ever done that. Now I'm going to go on and do the whole thing. Am I going to give that up? No way.
You said that it's not a big deal from a navigational point of view to sail around the world.
Well, look, I'm a professional navigator. That's my job. That's what I did at sea. So for me, navigation was like someone having fried eggs for breakfast. It was my job. I didn't think about it, I just did it.
But you didn't have very much technique aboard at that time.
I had exactly the same as any other ship. There was no GPS because there were no satellites. People say to me, didn't you miss GPS? I said, no. Why not? It hadn't been invented. How can I miss something that hasn't been invented? It's, I was navigating the same way as Captain Cook, exactly the same way as I did in the Merchant Navy. There was no difference. Only difference was I'm on a small boat. I'm nearer the surface of the sea, so I have to make some mathematical adjustments for that, which is simple. And it's rather more difficult with a boat going up and down to get an accurate altitude. So it used to take me longer, but I'm just doing the same job I did on a merchant ship.
You never lost your position?
Oh, there were times. Well, you never completely lose your position, because if you don't have a fix from the sun or the stars, you work out what course have I done, how many miles have I done. It's called a dead reckoning. So you'll say after 5 days, I haven't seen the sun for 5 days. Where am I? Well, I've been on this course, and I've been doing this speed approximately, so I must be about here. And you apply that to your next calculations, you see how far out it is. Normally it's not far out.
You are the only one who has finished this race. There have been many people dropping out, there have been several people dying. Crowhurst and afterwards Nigel Tetley. What do you think about these losses?
I think Crowhurst is a tragedy. He should never have gone. He was a dreamer. And I think he got himself too far into the dream to get out. But he should have got out. I think the tragedy is he didn't just stop in Cape Town. It would have been a very big voyage at that time. People would have respected him for it, and he could have come home. Tetley, I knew Nigel. I didn't know him before I left. I met him afterwards, and we got on very well. I've never understood why he did that. He'd performed, he'd almost completed that voyage. He was 1,000 miles from the finish. So near. It was an amazing voyage, really. And to do it in that trimaran of his was quite remarkable. And I don't think he ever gets the full credit for that.
When you did your circumnavigation, you became 30, and you wrote in your logbook that you're becoming a little bit older now. How is it feeling 50 years later?
Well, you know, at some point, you've got to settle down and stop rushing round. You know, you've got to think about your family and a job and all the rest of it. And so at 30, I probably reached the point where I should have got married. I shouldn't have married earlier. Because, you know, I was still wanting to go off and do things. In fact, of course, I kept going off doing things, and my wife was, after we got remarried, was very understanding. She knew that was me, and, you know, it's nothing to do with our relationship. I'd get away and I'd miss her, but she knew that I had to go and do these things. But I think, you know, as far as we know, we only have one life. Enjoy it. Make the most of it. There isn't another one. You haven't got a next one. This is it. So get out there and enjoy it.
Do you feel that the end is coming sooner or later? Are you afraid of that?
No, no. One thing we can be certain about in life, as someone once said, is death and taxes. And, you know, at some point, you'll die. Well, until then, I've got a few things I want to do, so I'm getting on with it. When it happens, it'll happen. Now, when you die, that's it. So there's no regrets. You're dead. You have no thinking, no feeling or anything. You've gone. So there's no point in worrying about it. When it happens, it will happen. But I'm in no hurry for it to happen. I've got things I want to do.